I never thought my Tuesday morning in Riverside, Ohio would start with watching a middle-aged woman with a blonde bob haircut rifling through my Honda Civic like she owned the place. But there she was, bold as brass, reaching into my passenger seat and grabbing my bright orange ice scraper. My name is Nathan Turner, and I have lived in the Willow Creek Estates subdivision for exactly 8 months. The neighborhood seemed perfect when I bought my 3-bedroom ranch house last spring. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, a community pool, and what the realtor called an active homeowners association. I should have paid more attention to that last part because active turned out to be code for nightmare fuel wrapped in pearls and passive aggression. The woman currently committing petty theft from my vehicle was none other than Brenda Whitmore, the HOA president and self-appointed guardian of every rule, regulation, and ridiculous bylaw ever conceived by suburban bureaucracy. She had made my life miserable since day one, starting with a violation notice about my mailbox being 3 inches too far from the curb, and escalating to weekly complaints about everything from my grass height to the shade of blue on my recycling bin. But this morning, watching her actually steal my property, something in me snapped. I had woken up to find my car windshield covered in a thick layer of frost. It was early December, and Ohio had been hit with an unexpected cold snap that sent temperatures plummeting into the teens overnight. I had stumbled outside in my bathrobe and slippers, coffee mug in hand, planning to warm up the car and scrape the windows before heading to work at the accounting firm downtown. That is when I saw Brenda, wearing her signature cream-colored pantsuit and far too much makeup for 7 in the morning, leaning into my unlocked car. I had forgotten to lock it the night before. A stupid mistake, but I lived in what I thought was a safe neighborhood. Apparently, I needed to protect my belongings from the HOA president more than any would-be burglar. "Hey," I shouted, setting my coffee down on the porch railing. "What the hell are you doing?" Brenda straightened up, my ice scraper clutched in her manicured hand, and had the audacity to look annoyed at being interrupted. "Oh, Nathan. Good morning. I was just borrowing this. My car is absolutely covered and I seem to have misplaced mine." "Borrowing implies you were going to ask first," I said, walking across my frost-covered lawn toward her. The cold bit through my thin bathrobe, but anger kept me warm enough. "That's called stealing." She waved her free hand dismissively, the motion making her chunky gold bracelets jangle. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just an ice scraper. I'll return it when I am finished. Besides, if you had followed proper parking protocols outlined in Section 12 of the HOA handbook, your vehicle would be in your garage where it belongs, not taking up street parking. My garage is full of boxes I have not unpacked yet, and there's nothing in the HOA rules that says I cannot park in front of my own house," I said, reaching for the scraper. She pulled it away, holding it against her chest like I was the one in the wrong. Actually, Section 12, subsection C clearly states that street parking is to be used for guest vehicles only. Resident vehicles should be garaged whenever possible. I have been meaning to issue you a violation notice about this." "You have got to be kidding me," I said, my breath coming out in visible puffs in the frigid air. "Give me back my scraper, Brenda. I told you, I will return it when I am done." My HOA duties require me to drive around the neighborhood this morning to document several violations I noticed yesterday evening. I cannot do that with a frosted windshield, now can I? She turned away from me, walking toward her white Lexus SUV parked 3 houses down. The same Lexus she had parked on the street, I noted, despite her lecture about proper parking protocols. I stood there for a moment, shivering in my bathrobe, trying to decide if this was really the hill I wanted to die on. But something about her entitled attitude, the way she had been harassing me for months, the sheer gall of stealing from me, and then acting like I was being unreasonable, it all crystallized into a moment of clarity. I was done being pushed around. I walked back to my porch, grabbed my coffee, and took a long sip while I watched Brenda start scraping her windshield with my bright orange scraper. Then I went inside, got dressed in record time, grabbed my car keys and my wallet and headed back outside. Brenda was still working on her windshield, taking her time, making sure every inch was perfectly clear. I walked past her without a word, got into my Honda and started the engine. The defroster roared to life and I sat there for a minute, letting the heat build up. Through my frosted windshield, I could see Brenda's blurry figure still scraping away at her Lexus. Then I got out, walked over to where she was working, and the moment she turned her back to scrape the rear window, I reached over and grabbed my ice scraper right out of her hand. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, spinning around so fast she nearly slipped on a patch of ice. "Taking back my property," I said calmly, already walking back toward my car. "You cannot just snatch things from people. That's assault." "Actually, it's called recovering stolen property," I called back over my shoulder. "And you are welcome to call the police if you would like to explain to them why you were stealing from my car." Her face went red, a vein popping out on her forehead that I could see even from several feet away. "I was borrowing it. How am I supposed to finish clearing my windshield now?" I paused at my car door and looked back at her. She was standing next to her Lexus, arms crossed, looking genuinely outraged that her theft had consequences. An idea formed in my mind, petty and childish and absolutely perfect. "I don't know, Brenda," I said, scraping a long streak across my windshield with exaggerated slowness. "Maybe try a credit card. I hear that works in emergencies." Her mouth dropped open. "A credit card? Are you serious?" "That's ridiculous. Just let me use the scraper for 5 more minutes." "Should have thought of that before you stole it from my car," I said, returning my attention to my windshield. The scraper worked beautifully, clearing away the frost in satisfying strips. "And before you gave me that lecture about parking violations while you are literally parked on the street yourself. That is completely different. I am performing HOA duties." "Sure, Brenda. Whatever you say." I finished clearing my windshield, taking my time, making sure every corner was perfectly transparent. Brenda stood there watching me, her anger practically radiating off her in waves. When I was done, I opened my car door and tossed the scraper onto the passenger seat, well out of her reach. "You are going to regret this, Nathan Turner," she said, her voice dropping into that particular tone of threat that middle-aged women perfected. "I am calling an emergency HOA board meeting. Your behavior is unacceptable, and there will be consequences." "Looking forward to it," I said, climbing into my now warm car. "Have fun with that credit card." As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Brenda was standing in the street, her phone pressed to her ear, probably already calling the other board members to complain about me. But what caught my attention was what she did next. After her phone call, she actually went to her Lexus, pulled out her wallet, and extracted what looked like a credit card. She approached her frost-covered windshield and started making pathetic scraping motions with the card, achieving basically nothing. I laughed so hard I nearly ran the stop sign at the end of our street. Work that day dragged on forever. I spent 8 hours reviewing spreadsheets and preparing quarterly reports, but my mind kept drifting back to the morning's confrontation. Part of me felt a little guilty for being so petty, but a larger part felt vindicated. Brenda had been making my life hell for months, and it felt good to finally push back, even in such a small way. Around 3 in the afternoon, My phone buzzed with an email. The subject line read, "Mandatory HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. in all caps." The email was from Brenda, sent to all residents of Willow Creek Estates, and it read, "Dear homeowners, an emergency meeting of the Willow Creek Estates HOA has been called for this evening at 7 p.m. in the community center. All residents are strongly encouraged to attend, as we will be discussing serious violations of community standards and behavioral issues that threaten the peaceful enjoyment of our neighborhood. This meeting was called in response to an incident this morning involving theft, harassment, and verbal abuse directed at a board member. Light refreshments will be served. Regards, Brenda Whitmore, HOA President." I read the email 3 times, my initial amusement curdling into anger. She was actually trying to flip the narrative, painting herself as the victim and me as some kind of violent criminal. The theft she mentioned was me taking back my own property. The harassment was me telling her no, and verbal abuse was apparently my credit card comment. This was unbelievable. I forwarded the email to my friend Marcus, who lived 2 streets over in the same subdivision. Marcus was a lawyer, though his specialty was corporate law, not HOA disputes. Still, he had been my sounding board for the past few months as I dealt with Brenda's increasingly ridiculous demands. He called me within 5 minutes. "Dude, what did you do?" he asked, laughter in his voice. I explained the morning's events in detail, from catching Brenda stealing my ice scraper to the credit card comment. When I finished, Marcus was laughing so hard I worried he might drop his phone. "You are my hero," he finally managed. "But you know she is going to make this meeting hell for you, right?" "Let her try," I said. "I was the one who got robbed this morning. If she wants to call a meeting about it, fine. I will tell everyone exactly what happened." "I will be there," Marcus promised. "This is better than anything on TV. Oh, and Nathan, bring evidence if you have any. Time stamps, texts, anything that can back up your version of events." That was good advice. I spent my lunch break writing down everything that happened that morning, including exact times and quotes as best as I could remember them. I also checked my Ring doorbell camera footage. Sure enough, there was clear video of Brenda approaching my car at 6:47 a.m., looking around to make sure no one was watching, and then reaching inside to grab the ice scraper. The video did not have audio, but the visual evidence was damning enough. I downloaded the footage to my phone and felt a grim satisfaction. If Brenda wanted to play games, I was ready. The rest of the workday crawled by. Finally, at 5:30, I packed up my things and headed home. I had just enough time to grab dinner and prepare for what I was now thinking of as the Battle of Willow Creek Estates. When I arrived home, I noticed a bright pink violation notice stuck to my front door. My heart sank. I pulled it off and read, "Notice of violation. Property, 847 Maple Drive. Violation. Unauthorized street parking of resident vehicle. Section 12, C of HOA bylaws requires resident vehicles to be garaged when not in use. Fine, $50. Violation. Confrontational behavior toward HOA board member. Section 3 requires all residents to treat board members with respect and courtesy. Fine, $100. Total fines, $150. Payment due within 15 days. Failure to pay will result in additional fines and possible legal action. Brenda Whitmore, HOA President." I stared at the notice in disbelief. She was actually fining me $100 for confrontational behavior, which consisted of me retrieving my stolen property. This was insane. I took a photo of the violation notice and sent it to Marcus with a message. "She is fining me $150 for this morning." His response came immediately. Don't pay it." "That's absurd. See you at 7. I made myself a quick sandwich, changed into jeans and a sweater, and reviewed my notes one more time. At 6:45, I grabbed my phone with the Ring camera footage and headed to the community center. The Willow Creek Estates Community Center was a modest building near the neighborhood pool, featuring a large meeting room with folding chairs, a small kitchen, and bathrooms. By the time I arrived at 6:55, the parking lot was already half full. Apparently, Brenda's dramatic email had drawn quite a crowd. I walked inside to find about 30 residents already seated, chatting in small groups. The room had that particular energy of people who knew drama was coming and were excited to witness it. At the front of the room, a long table was set up with 5 chairs behind it, 3 of which were already occupied. Brenda sat in the center chair, looking far too pleased with herself. To her left was Richard Chen, the HOA treasurer, a quiet man in his 60s who mostly went along with whatever Brenda wanted. To her right was Patricia "Patty" Henderson, the secretary, a woman in her 50s who seemed permanently exhausted by Brenda's antics but lacked the spine to stand up to her. 2 empty chairs remained at the table. Those belonged to the other 2 board members. Tom Kowalski, the vice president who was out of town on business according to neighborhood gossip, and Jennifer Martinez, a board member who had recently started pushing back against Brenda's more extreme proposals. I spotted Marcus sitting in the 3rd row and made my way over to him. He was grinning like this was the best entertainment he had seen in months. "Popcorn would make this perfect," he whispered as I sat down. "Shut up," I muttered, but I was fighting a smile. At exactly 7 p.m., Brenda called the meeting to order by tapping a gavel against the table 3 times. Where she got a gavel, I had no idea, but it was very on brand for her. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Brenda began, her voice taking on that false sweetness she used when addressing the full community. "I know a Tuesday evening is not ideal, but we have some serious matters to discuss that could not wait for our regular monthly meeting." She paused dramatically, looking around the room to make sure she had everyone's attention. "This morning, I was the victim of a disturbing incident involving theft and verbal abuse," she continued. "As your HOA president, I work tirelessly to maintain the standards and values that make Willow Creek Estates such a wonderful place to live. But I cannot do my job if residents feel entitled to treat board members with disrespect and hostility." I felt my blood pressure rising. The audacity of this woman was truly breathtaking. "The incident in question involved Nathan Turner," Brenda said, gesturing toward me. Everyone in the room turned to look at me, and I felt my face flush. "This morning, Mr. Turner physically assaulted me while I was attempting to perform my HOA duties and subjected me to verbal harassment when I attempted to address his parking violations." "That is complete nonsense," I said loudly, standing up. "And you know it." "Mr. Turner, you will have an opportunity to speak when I am finished," Brenda said coldly. "Please sit down." "No, I will not sit down while you lie about what happened," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "You want to tell everyone what really happened this morning. I came outside to find you stealing my ice scraper from my car. You took it without asking, and when I asked for it back, you refused and walked away with it. I had to take it back from you, and that's when you got mad." The room erupted in murmurs. Brenda's face was turning red again. "I was borrowing it," she insisted. "I told you I would return it. You were stealing it," I corrected. "And I have video evidence to prove it." That shut everyone up. Brenda's eyes widened, and I saw real fear flash across her face for just a second before she composed herself. "Video evidence?" Richard asked, leaning forward with interest. This was probably the most engaged I had ever seen him at an HOA meeting. "Yes," I said, pulling out my phone. My Ring doorbell camera captured the whole thing. Would anyone like to see Brenda rifling through my car at 6:47 this morning? "That is a violation of privacy," Brenda sputtered. "You cannot just record people without their consent." "Actually, Ring doorbells are completely legal in Ohio," Marcus said, standing up beside me. "And they are specifically designed to record activity around someone's property. For security purposes. To protect against theft." Several people laughed at that, and I saw Brenda's jaw clench. "I think we would all like to see this footage," said a voice from the back of the room. I turned to see Jennifer Martinez had arrived, still in her nurse's scrubs from work. She walked down the aisle and took her seat at the board table. "As a board member, I want to see what actually happened before we discuss any violations or fines." Brenda looked like she wanted to argue, but with Jennifer there and the entire room waiting expectantly, she had no choice. "Fine," she said tightly. "Show us this supposed evidence." I walked to the front of the room and pulled up the video on my phone. "Does anyone have a way to connect this to a bigger screen?" "I have got it," said a man I recognized as Dave Cunningham, who lived across the street from me. He pulled out a cable and connected my phone to a TV mounted on the wall. Within seconds, the Ring camera footage was playing on the big screen for everyone to see. The video was crystal clear. There was Brenda, walking up to my Honda at 6:47 a.m., looking left and right like a cartoon burglar checking for witnesses. Then she opened the passenger door, reached inside and grabbed the orange ice scraper. She examined it, apparently deemed it satisfactory, and closed the door. She turned toward her Lexus, my ice scraper in hand, and that was when I appeared at the edge of the frame in my bathrobe. The video had no audio, but my body language was clear. I was calling out to her, confused and upset. Brenda turned, and even without sound, anyone could see she was defensive and dismissive. She gestured at the scraper, clearly trying to justify taking it, and then turned away from me, walking toward her car. The video ended with me standing there, arms crossed, watching her walk away with my property. The room was silent when the video finished. "So," Jennifer said slowly, "let me make sure I understand this. Brenda, you entered Nathan's vehicle without permission, removed his property, and when he confronted you, you refused to return it. I was borrowing it." Brenda insisted, but her voice had lost its authoritative edge. She sounded defensive now, almost whiny. "My windshield was frosted over and I needed to get it cleared to perform my HOA inspections. I told Nathan I would return it when I was done." "But you did not ask first," Jennifer said. "It was not a question." Well, he was not outside yet and I was in a hurry," Brenda stammered. "So you stole it," Jennifer said flatly. "You took someone's property without permission. That is theft, Brenda." "It was just an ice scraper." Brenda's voice was rising now, losing all pretense of calm. "Why is everyone acting like I committed some major crime? It's a $5 piece of plastic." "The value does not matter," Marcus said from his seat. "Theft is theft. And then you tried to fine Nathan for retrieving his own property and calling you out on it. That is abuse of your position as HOA president." "I agree," said a woman I did not know, sitting in the front row. "I have lived here for 12 years, and I am tired of watching Brenda abuse her power. Last month, she fined me $75 because my Christmas decorations went up 3 days before the approved decoration window. 3 days. I got a fine for having the wrong shade of beige on my house trim," another man called out. "I had to repaint it twice before she approved it, and the final color was basically identical to what I started with." The room exploded into complaints. It seemed like everyone had a story about Brenda's overreach and petty tyranny. Richard and Patty sat at the table looking uncomfortable, while Jennifer watched with a knowing expression. Brenda tried to call for order, banging her gavel repeatedly, but no one was listening anymore. Enough. Brenda finally shouted, standing up so fast her chair fell over backward. I will not sit here and be disrespected by the very people I have worked so hard to serve. This community was falling apart before I became president. I brought order and standards back to Willow Creek Estates. You brought fear and harassment, Jennifer said quietly, but her voice cut through the noise. Everyone fell silent again. Brenda, I have been concerned about your behavior as president for a while now, but this incident with Nathan is the final straw. You cannot steal from residents and then punish them when they object. That is not leadership. That is bullying. How dare you, Brenda hissed, after everything I have done for this community. What exactly have you done besides terrorize everyone with violations and fines? I asked. Since I moved here 8 months ago, you have done nothing but harass me. My mailbox, my grass, my recycling bin, my parking. And I know I am not the only one. You use your position to control people and make yourself feel important. Those are community standards, Brenda insisted. Standards that were voted on and approved by the board. Standards you wrote and pushed through while Tom was out of town and before Jennifer joined the board, Patty said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her, surprised to hear her speak up. She looked shocked at herself but continued. I voted yes on most of your proposals because you told me they were necessary, but I have been having second thoughts for months now. This has gone too far, Brenda. Brenda looked around the table, seeing the tide turning against her. Richard, you agree with me, right? Tell them. Richard was quiet for a long moment, studying his hands. Finally, he looked up. I think we need to have a serious discussion about our enforcement policies, and I think you need to void Nathan's fines. He did not violate anything this morning except your pride. Brenda's face went through several shades of red before settling on an almost purple hue. Fine, she spat. Fine. If this is how you all feel, then maybe you do not deserve my leadership. Maybe I should just resign and let this community fall back into chaos. I think that is an excellent idea, Jennifer said calmly. I move that we accept Brenda Whitmore's resignation as HOA president, effective immediately. I second that motion, Patty said quickly. All in favor? Jennifer asked. 3 hands went up at the board table. Jennifer's, Patty's, and Richard's. Brenda stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You cannot do this, she finally managed. Tom is not here. You need a full board vote. According to the HOA bylaws that you love to quote so much, 3 board members constitute a quorum for emergency votes, Jennifer said. Your resignation is accepted. Please gather your things and exit the meeting. The room was dead silent. Everyone watched Brenda, waiting to see what she would do. For a moment, I thought she might actually flip the table or have some kind of breakdown. But instead, she drew herself up, grabbed her purse and her ridiculous gavel, and walked toward the door with as much dignity as she could muster. You will all regret this, she said from the doorway, her voice shaking with fury. This community is going to fall apart without me, and when it does, do not come crying to me to fix it. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. The room erupted into applause and cheers. I sat down heavily in my chair, feeling like I had just run a marathon. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder, grinning. That was incredible, he said. I wish I had recorded that. Jennifer called for order, and after a few minutes, everyone settled down. All right, folks, we still need to conduct some official business. First, we need to elect an interim president until our next regular election. I nominate Richard Chen. I second that, Patty said. Richard was elected unanimously, looking slightly terrified at the prospect. But he managed to smile and accepted the position. My first act as president is to void all fines issued by Brenda in the past year pending review, Richard said, and another cheer went up. We will be going through our enforcement policies and making some serious changes. This board should serve the community, not terrorize it. The meeting continued for another hour, with residents voicing their concerns and the board taking notes. It felt like a weight had been lifted off the entire neighborhood. People were actually smiling and joking around, something I had not seen much of since moving in. As people started to leave, several neighbors came up to me to shake my hand or thank me for standing up to Brenda. Apparently, I had become an accidental hero. "You should have seen your face when you said the credit card thing," Dave Cunningham said, laughing. "I was watching from my window this morning. She actually tried it, stood there scraping with her credit card for like 10 minutes before she gave up and went back inside." I could not help but laugh at that image. I honestly did not think she would actually do it. "Oh, she did," Dave confirmed, "and she looked absolutely miserable. Best entertainment I have had in months." As the community center emptied out, I found myself standing with Jennifer, Richard, and Patty. They all looked exhausted but relieved. "Thank you for bringing that video," Jennifer said. "I've been trying to find a way to address Brenda's behavior for weeks, but she is, or was, very good at covering her tracks. Having that clear evidence made everything possible." "I am just glad it's over," I admitted. "I was getting tired of the constant harassment." "It is not entirely over," Richard warned. "Brenda is not going to take this lying down. She has a lot of pride, and I imagine she is going to make some noise about this." He was right, of course, but I had no idea just how much noise Brenda was about to make. The next morning, I woke up to find my car spray painted with the word thief in large orange letters across the driver's side. The same orange as my ice scraper, I noted with a sinking feeling. Every tire had been slashed, and someone had poured what looked like syrup all over the windshield and hood. I stood in my driveway in my pajamas, staring at the vandalism in disbelief. My first call was to the police. My second was to Marcus. The Riverside Police Department sent Officer Janet Morrison, a patient woman in her 30s who took photos of everything, and asked me detailed questions about any enemies I might have. When I told her about the previous day's HOA meeting and Brenda's dramatic exit, she raised her eyebrows. "You think your former HOA president did this?" she asked. "I think it is a pretty big coincidence that my car gets vandalized the night after she gets forced to resign," I said. "And that orange spray paint is almost the exact same color as my ice scraper, which was the whole cause of the original conflict. Do you have security camera footage of your driveway?" Officer Morrison asked. I shook my head. "My Ring doorbell faces the front porch and door, not the driveway. I am going to install more cameras today, but that does not help me now." "I will go have a conversation with Miss Whitmore," Officer Morrison said, closing her notebook. "In the meantime, file a claim with your insurance company for the damage, and document everything. If this escalates, you will want a paper trail." After Officer Morrison left, I called my insurance company and started the claim process. Then I called work to let them know I would be late since I had no functioning vehicle. My boss was understanding, fortunately. Then I sat on my porch steps and tried to process the situation. This was insane. Brenda had actually vandalized my car. Or at least, I was 99% sure it was her, but proving it was going to be another matter. Marcus showed up an hour later, took one look at my car, and let out a low whistle. "Okay, this is officially crazy. She really lost it." What am I supposed to do? I asked. Even if the police talk to her, she is just going to deny it. Probably, Marcus agreed. But the police report creates a record, and if she does anything else, that record will matter. For now, focus on getting your car fixed and installing those security cameras. Cover your bases. The insurance adjuster came out that afternoon and confirmed that I was looking at about $3,000 in damage. Thankfully, my comprehensive coverage would handle most of it after the deductible, but I would be without my car for at least a week while the body shop repaired and repainted everything. While I was dealing with the insurance paperwork, Officer Morrison called me back. I spoke with Miss Whitmore, she said. She denies any involvement in the vandalism and seemed genuinely offended at the suggestion. She claims she was home all night and her husband can verify that. Of course he can, I muttered. I had met Brenda's husband Gary exactly once, during a neighborhood barbecue over the summer. He was a quiet, defeated-looking man who seemed to exist solely to agree with whatever Brenda said. She also made some interesting claims about you, Officer Morrison continued. Said you have been harassing her for months, that you assaulted her yesterday morning, and that you have been engaging in a campaign to turn the neighborhood against her. That is absolutely false, I said, feeling my blood pressure spike again. She is the one who has been harassing me since the day I moved in. I have violation notices to prove it. I figured, Officer Morrison said. Her story did not really add up, and several of your neighbors I spoke with confirmed your version of events. But without evidence directly connecting her to the vandalism, there is not much I can do right now. Keep your eyes open and let me know if anything else happens. I thanked her and hung up, feeling frustrated and helpless. Brenda had essentially gotten away with destroying my car, and there was nothing I could do about it. The next few days were relatively quiet. I borrowed Marcus's car to get to work, installed 3 new security cameras covering my driveway and yard, and tried to put the whole incident behind me. My car was in the shop. Brenda had been removed from the HOA board, and life was slowly returning to normal. Then the lawsuit arrived. I came home on Friday evening to find a process server waiting on my porch. He handed me a thick envelope, asked me to verify my identity, and then left. Inside was a lawsuit filed by Brenda Whitmore, seeking $50,000 in damages for defamation, emotional distress, and loss of reputation. According to the complaint, I had engaged in a malicious campaign to destroy Miss Whitmore's character through the distribution of illegally obtained video footage and false accusations of theft. I sat down hard on my porch steps, reading through the legal complaint with growing disbelief. She was actually suing me for proving that she stole my ice scraper. I called Marcus immediately. She did what? He practically yelled into the phone. Are you kidding me right now? I wish I was, I said, flipping through the pages. Can she actually do this? Can you sue someone for defamation when you are literally on video doing the thing they accused you of? No, she is going to lose this lawsuit spectacularly, Marcus said, but that does not mean she cannot make your life hell in the process. Civil litigation is expensive and time-consuming. She knows that. This is retaliation. So what do I do? You need a lawyer. This is not my area, but I know someone who handles this kind of thing. Let me make some calls. By Monday morning, I was sitting in the office of Rebecca Chen, no relation to Richard, a litigation attorney who specialized in defamation and HOA disputes. She reviewed the complaint, watched my Ring camera footage, and listened to my account of everything that had happened. This is a frivolous lawsuit, she said bluntly. You have video evidence proving your accusations were true, which is an absolute defense against defamation. But Marcus was right. She can still drag you through months of litigation, and even frivolous lawsuits cost money to defend. How much are we talking? I asked, dreading the answer. If she pushes this all the way to trial, you could be looking at 20 to 30,000 in legal fees. If we can get it dismissed early, maybe 5 to 10,000. I felt sick. I had some savings, but that kind of money would wipe me out. However, Rebecca continued, there is another option. We can file a motion to dismiss based on the video evidence, and we can also countersue for malicious prosecution and abuse of process. If we win the countersuit, she would be liable for your legal fees and additional damages. Let's do that, I said. I am not letting her bully me into submission. Rebecca smiled. Good. I like clients with spine. Let's make Miss Whitmore regret filing this lawsuit. Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca filed our response to Brenda's lawsuit along with a counterclaim seeking $75,000 in damages. We argued that Brenda had filed her lawsuit in bad faith, knowing her claims were false, in order to retaliate against me for exposing her theft and abuse of power as HOA president. Brenda's attorney, according to court records, was a guy named Stephen Walsh from a small firm in downtown Riverside. Marcus did some digging and found out Walsh had a reputation for taking questionable cases from difficult clients. He was apparently not particularly good at his job, but was willing to file almost anything if the client could pay his retainer. While the legal process ground forward, life in Willow Creek Estates had improved dramatically. Richard Chen turned out to be a reasonable and fair HOA president. He and Jennifer reviewed all of Brenda's enforcement actions from the past year and voided about 60% of them as being overly harsh or based on rules that were too vague to enforce fairly. The neighborhood actually felt like a community again, instead of a police state. But Brenda was not taking her fall from grace well. She became a recluse, rarely leaving her house except to get her mail or go to the grocery store. When she did venture outside, she glared at anyone who made eye contact with her. Her husband Gary seemed even more defeated than before, hunched over and scurrying to and from his car like he was trying to avoid being noticed. Several neighbors reported seeing Brenda sitting in her car late at night, just parked on the street, watching houses. It was creepy, but she was not technically doing anything illegal. Still, people were getting uncomfortable. Then things escalated again. Jennifer Martinez found her tires slashed one morning in early January. The next night, Dave Cunningham's mailbox was torn out of the ground and smashed. 2 days later, someone dumped garbage all over Richard Chen's front lawn. Each incident was reported to the police, and each time, Brenda had an alibi. She was home with her husband or she was at the grocery store with receipts to prove it, but everyone knew it was her. It had to be. The timing was too perfect, and only people who had been involved in her removal from the HOA board were being targeted. Officer Morrison came back to interview all of us. "I know you all believe Miss Whitmore is behind this," she said, "but I need evidence." Alibis can be faked, but without video footage or witnesses placing her at the scenes, I cannot make an arrest. "What if we set up a trap?" Marcus suggested. He had joined us for the meeting at Richard's house, along with Jennifer, Dave, and Patty. "We know she is targeting board members and people who spoke out against her. What if we give her an obvious target and make sure we catch her on camera this time?" "I cannot condone civilians trying to catch a suspected criminal," Officer Morrison said carefully. "However, I also cannot stop you from installing security cameras on your own property to protect your belongings." She gave us a meaningful look, and we all understood. Over the next week, we coordinated our efforts. Marcus volunteered his house as the trap, since he had not been directly targeted yet, but had spoken in my defense at the infamous HOA meeting. He installed 6 high-definition cameras covering every angle of his property, including a hidden camera pointing at the street. Then we waited. We did not have to wait long. 3 nights later, at 2:47 a.m., Marcus's security system sent an alert to his phone. Multiple cameras had detected motion in his driveway. Marcus, who had been sleeping in his living room specifically for this purpose, immediately checked the camera feeds on his phone. There was Brenda Whitmore, dressed in dark clothes, creeping up his driveway with a can of spray paint in her hand. She approached his Toyota Camry and was just starting to shake the paint can when Marcus threw on his porch lights and opened his front door. "Brenda, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted. She froze like a deer in headlights, the spray paint can still in her hand, clearly visible in the porch light. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brenda dropped the can and ran. She made it about 20 feet before tripping over her own feet and falling hard on Marcus's driveway. By the time she got up, Marcus was already on the phone with 911, and I was running across the street from where I had been waiting at Marcus's house. We had planned this as a team effort. "Stop right there, Brenda," I said, positioning myself between her and her escape route. "The police are already on their way." "You cannot prove anything," she panted, but there was no conviction in her voice. She knew she had been caught. "Actually, I have 6 cameras that recorded you walking up my driveway with spray paint," Marcus said, still on the phone with the dispatcher. "We have got you dead to rights." Brenda looked around wildly, like she was still considering running but then seemed to deflate. She sat down on Marcus's driveway, and to my surprise, she started crying. "This is all your fault," she sobbed, looking at me with genuine hatred. "I was a good HOA president. I worked so hard to make this neighborhood perfect, and you ruined everything. You and your stupid ice scraper. You stole from me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "And when I called you out on it, you tried to destroy my life. You vandalized my car, filed a bogus lawsuit, and went after everyone who stood up to you. This is not on me, Brenda. You did this to yourself." She did not respond, just sat there crying until the police arrived 5 minutes later. Officer Morrison stepped out of the patrol car with another officer, took one look at the scene, and sighed. "Miss Whitmore," she said, "we have been through this before. I am going to need you to stand up and place your hands behind your back." "What? No, I did not do anything." Brenda insisted, struggling to her feet. "These men are harassing me. They lured me here. We have video footage of you approaching Mr. Rivera's vehicle with spray paint at 2:47 a.m., Officer Morrison said patiently. "That's vandalism and criminal mischief. Please place your hands behind your back." The reality of the situation seemed to hit Brenda all at once. "No, wait, you do not understand. I was walking, and please, you cannot arrest me." But Officer Morrison had already cuffed her and was reading her rights. Brenda continued to protest and cry as she was placed in the back of the patrol car. The spray paint can was bagged as evidence, and Officer Morrison took our statements and copies of the security footage. "We will probably be able to connect her to the other incidents now," Officer Morrison said. "Often once people know they are caught, they start talking, and we can get a warrant to search her house for evidence. Good work setting this up, though next time maybe give me a heads up first." Marcus and I exchanged guilty looks. "Sorry," Marcus said. "We did not want her to get tipped off somehow." Officer Morrison gave us a stern look but did not push it. After she left with Brenda in custody, Marcus and I stood in his driveway, processing what had just happened. "That was intense," Marcus finally said. "Yeah," I agreed. "I actually feel kind of bad for her. She looked completely broken." "Do not feel too bad," Marcus said. "She brought this on herself. She could have just apologized after the ice scraper thing and moved on, but instead, she escalated and escalated until she ended up in handcuffs. He was right, but it was still sad to watch someone self-destruct so completely over something so petty. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with news of Brenda's arrest. By noon, the story had spread to the entire subdivision. People I barely knew stopped me to ask for details, or to tell me they always knew Brenda was unstable. The legal process moved forward quickly after that. Brenda was charged with multiple counts of vandalism and criminal mischief. When the police searched her house, they found more spray paint cans, receipts for materials used in the various acts of vandalism, and a notebook where she had apparently been planning additional targets. The evidence was overwhelming. Her attorney, Stephen Walsh, tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not feeling generous given the number of victims and the deliberate nature of the crimes. Brenda eventually pleaded guilty to 4 counts of vandalism in exchange for the prosecutor dropping the more serious charges. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail, 2 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution to all of her victims. The total came to about $8,000, covering the damage to my car, Jennifer's tires, Dave's mailbox, Richard's lawn restoration, and various other incidents. As for the civil lawsuit, Brenda's attorney withdrew it 2 days after her arrest. Rebecca Chen immediately filed a motion to have Brenda pay my legal fees under Ohio's frivolous lawsuit statute. The judge agreed, awarding me $7,500 to cover my costs. Combined with the restitution for my vandalized car, I actually came out slightly ahead financially, though that felt like cold comfort. The real victory was that Brenda was finally out of our lives. Gary Whitmore filed for divorce 3 weeks after Brenda's arrest, and honestly, no one blamed him. He had spent years under her thumb, and this seemed to be his breaking point. The divorce was finalized quickly since he was not contesting anything, just wanted out. He moved to an apartment across town while Brenda served her jail sentence. When Brenda was released after serving 60 days of her 90-day sentence with good behavior, she quietly put her house up for sale. She was still on probation and had to stay in the area, but she moved into a small condo on the other side of Riverside where no one knew her story. I saw her one last time, about a month after she moved out. I was at the grocery store, and there she was in the cereal aisle, looking small and tired. Her hair had gone gray. She was not wearing makeup, and she moved with a kind of defeated shuffle that made her seem 10 years older than she was. Our eyes met for just a second. I expected anger or hatred, but what I saw was just exhaustion and maybe a hint of shame. She looked away quickly, grabbed a box of corn flakes, and hurried away down the aisle. I did not follow her or say anything. What was there to say? Her actions had destroyed her own life far more effectively than anything I could have done. Life in Willow Creek Estates continued to improve throughout the spring. Richard Chen remained HOA president and ran unopposed in the annual election that May. Jennifer Martinez was elected vice president. Together, they systematically reviewed and reformed the HOA bylaws, eliminating the most oppressive rules and creating a more reasonable enforcement system focused on actual community problems rather than petty violations. The neighborhood started having regular social events again. Block parties, pool parties, Halloween decoration contests that did not result in fines. People actually enjoyed living there now. As for me, I finally finished unpacking my garage and started parking my car inside like Brenda had always wanted. Not because of any HOA rule, but because after having my car vandalized once, I was not taking any chances. I also kept all my security cameras running, just in case. Once you have been through something like that, it is hard to feel completely safe again. Marcus and I became closer friends through the whole ordeal. We started a weekly poker night with Dave, Richard, and a few other neighbors. It was nice to build actual community connections without the constant fear of HOA violations hanging over everything. I did think about Brenda sometimes, usually when I was scraping ice off my windshield in the winter. I had kept that orange ice scraper, the one that started everything. It seemed important somehow, a reminder of how small conflicts can spiral out of control when pride and power get involved. The lawsuit money and restitution payments came through in installments over the course of that year. I put most of it into savings, but I did spend a little on a new security system with even better cameras, and I bought a second ice scraper, which I kept in my garage as a backup, just in case. The criminal restitution payments from Brenda were set up on a monthly payment plan since she could not afford to pay the full amount at once. Every month, a check would arrive from her probation office, another reminder of the chaos that had consumed our neighborhood for those few months. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that Brenda had taken a job as a clerk at a hardware store across town. It was a far cry from her previous life as a HOA president wielding power over dozens of families, but probably healthier for everyone involved, especially her. One evening in late summer, almost 9 months after the ice scraper incident, I was sitting on my porch with a beer when Brenda Whitmore drove by. He had been coming back to the neighborhood occasionally to visit his old neighbor friends who did not blame him for Brenda's behavior. He saw me and actually pulled over, rolling down his window. "Hey, Nathan," he called out. "Got a minute?" I walked over to his car, curious. Gary and I had never really talked beyond polite hellos. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. "For standing up to Brenda. I know that sounds weird coming from me, but you have no idea what it was like living with her when she was in full control freak mode. The HOA presidency made it so much worse. After she got arrested and everything fell apart, it was like I could finally breathe again." "I am sorry it went as far as it did," I said. "I never wanted anyone to get arrested or lose their marriage. I just wanted her to stop stealing my stuff and harassing me." "She needed consequences," Gary said firmly. "I tried for years to get her to see how unreasonable she was being, but she would not listen. Maybe hitting rock bottom will help her get some perspective, or maybe it will not. Either way, it is not my problem anymore." He looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing in particular, and then he drove off. I went back to my porch and my beer, thinking about how one small incident on a cold December morning had changed so many lives. That orange ice scraper sat in my passenger seat, a permanent reminder. Sometimes coworkers would notice it and ask about the bright color. I would just smile and say it was easy to find in the car. I never told them the full story. It was too complicated, too strange, too specific to that time and place. But every winter morning when frost covered my windshield and I reached for that scraper, I thought about Brenda standing next to her Lexus, desperately trying to clear ice with a credit card because she was too proud to admit she had been wrong. I thought about how a tiny moment of entitlement and theft had cascaded into arrests and lawsuits and destroyed relationships. Mostly, I thought about how important it is to stand up for yourself, even over something as small and seemingly insignificant as an ice scraper. Because if you let people push you around on the small stuff, they will keep pushing until there is nothing left of you but compliance and resentment. The HOA at Willow Creek Estates never forgot what happened. It became neighborhood legend, the cautionary tale told to new residents about the importance of reasonable rules and respectful leadership. Some people embellished the details, making Brenda into more of a monster than she really was, or making me into more of a hero than I deserved to be. The truth was simpler and sadder. A woman with control issues was given a little bit of power and let it consume her entire identity. When that power was threatened, she lashed out in increasingly destructive ways until she destroyed everything she had built. There was no villain, just flawed people making bad choices under stress. But the ice scraper remained, orange and plastic and mundane, the tiny catalyst that had revealed all those flaws and brought all those bad choices into the light. Winter came around again, and with it, more frosty mornings. Each time I went out to scrape my windshield, I made sure my car was locked. Not because I expected Brenda to come back. She was long gone and had no reason to return, but because the experience had taught me to protect what was mine, even the small things. The neighborhood continued to thrive under Richard's leadership. Property values actually went up slightly, which the realtor I talked to attributed to the improved community atmosphere. People wanted to live in a neighborhood with a reasonable HOA, not a dictatorship disguised as community standards. Jennifer Martinez told me one evening at a neighborhood barbecue that she had run into Brenda once at a pharmacy. Brenda had looked through her without any sign of recognition, as if she could not bear to acknowledge that part of her life. Jennifer said it was eerie, like talking to a ghost of someone who used to be. I never saw Brenda again after that grocery store encounter. She existed only in stories now, the cautionary tale of the HOA president who went too far. Marcus eventually moved out of Willow Creek Estates, taking a job in Columbus that was too good to pass up. Before he left, we had one last poker night and he gave me a gift. A second ice scraper, this one bright green, with a note that said, "Just in case someone steals the first one again." We laughed about it, but I kept both scrapers in my car from then on. The orange one that started everything, and the green one that represented moving forward. Life returned to normal, which was all I had wanted in the first place. I went to work, came home, mowed my lawn to a reasonable height without fear of violation notices, parked wherever I wanted, and generally enjoyed the simple pleasure of living in my own house without someone constantly looking over my shoulder for infractions. The legal payments from Brenda continued like clockwork, a monthly reminder that got smaller and smaller until finally they stopped. The debt was paid. The chapter was closed. Sometimes, on particularly cold winter mornings, I would look at that orange ice scraper and remember the absurdity of it all. A $5 piece of plastic had caused thousands of dollars in damage, destroyed a marriage, ended a political career, and resulted in criminal convictions. It seemed impossible, but it had happened. The ice scraper sat on my dashboard through summer and winter, spring and fall, a permanent fixture in my car. Friends would ask why I kept it out year-round instead of storing it seasonally. I would shrug and say it was easier to keep it handy. But the real reason was that it reminded me of an important lesson: stand up for yourself, even when the stakes seem small. Because if someone will steal your ice scraper and lie about it, they will do worse given the chance. And if you let them get away with it, you are teaching them that they can. That orange ice scraper became my line in the sand, the moment I decided I was done being pushed around by petty tyrants with a little bit of power. And while the consequences were more dramatic than I ever could have anticipated, I did not regret taking that stand. Willow Creek Estates had become what it should have always been: a community of neighbors who looked out for each other, solved problems together, and treated each other with respect. Richard Chen retired as HOA president after 3 successful years, and Jennifer Martinez took over, continuing the tradition of reasonable governance. The rules were still there, but they made sense now. No one got fined for grass being half an inch too tall or Christmas decorations going up a day early. The HOA focused on actual problems, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and mediating legitimate disputes between neighbors. It was boring, in the best possible way. I stayed in that house for several more years before eventually taking a job in Cleveland that required relocating. When I put my house on the market, it sold in 3 days. The new owners were a young couple with a baby, excited to join such a welcoming community. As I was packing up to move, I found that orange ice scraper one last time. I stood there in my garage holding it, remembering everything. Then I smiled, walked over to my car, and placed it on the front seat of the Honda I was about to drive to my new home. That ice scraper had cost me a lot of stress and money, but it had also taught me something valuable about standing up for yourself and not letting bullies, even petty suburban ones, push you around. It had earned its permanent place in my car. The new owners of my house asked if I wanted to leave any advice about living in Willow Creek Estates. I thought about it for a moment, then told them the truth. It is a great neighborhood with good people. The HOA is reasonable and fair. Lock your car at night. And if anyone ever tries to take something that belongs to you, do not let them get away with it, no matter how small it seems. They looked confused by that last bit, but they nodded politely. I drove away from Willow Creek Estates on a sunny Saturday morning in May, the orange ice scraper sitting on my passenger seat where it had lived for years. In my rearview mirror, I could see the neighborhood sign getting smaller and smaller, and with it, the memory of that cold December morning that changed everything. But the lesson stayed with me, solid and permanent as the plastic scraper itself. Stand your ground, document everything, and never let anyone make you feel like you are wrong for protecting what is yours. Not your property, not your dignity, and definitely not your bright orange ice scraper. The end of that story came not with dramatic confrontation or revenge, but with the simple satisfaction of having stood up for myself and watching a bully face the natural consequences of her own actions. Brenda Whitmore had stolen something small and meaningless, and in doing so had revealed the rot at the core of her character. The ice scraper was never really about the ice scraper. It was about respect, boundaries, and refusing to be diminished by people who thought their authority entitled them to take whatever they wanted. As I merged onto the highway heading toward Cleveland and a new chapter of my life, I glanced one more time at that orange scraper. It had traveled quite a journey from a simple winter tool to a symbol of suburban rebellion to a keepsake of lessons learned the hard way. And somewhere in Riverside, Ohio, Brenda Whitmore was presumably living her own new chapter, hopefully having learned some lessons of her own. But that was not my concern anymore. I had moved on, taking with me only the wisdom earned through conflict and the bright orange reminder that sometimes the smallest battles are worth fighting. The scraper stayed with me through that next house in Cleveland, and the one after that, when I eventually moved to Cincinnati. It became part of my story, the conversation piece that led to the tale of the HOA president and the ice scraper, told at parties and gatherings, growing slightly more embellished with each retelling, but never losing its essential truth. And every winter when frost covered my windshield and I reached for that familiar orange handle, I smiled and remembered that cold December morning in Willow Creek Estates, when I decided that enough was enough, and that some things, no matter how small, are worth fighting for.